Hello and welcome back to Dropping Knowledge. I apologize for not being able to post a video in such a long time, but there were things that got in the way. And because of the topic that I want to cover today, I was debating on how personal I wanted to make this video. And what I want to talk to you about today is law enforcement suicides. There have been an increase in the last few years in law enforcement suicides, and it's a pattern that has continued into 2022. And like always, I want to share some numbers with you and share a couple other things. Between 2016 and 2019, law enforcement suicides outnumbered line of duty deaths, with the exception of 2020 and 2021, when COVID was actually the leading cause of death for law enforcement. Some of the risk factors that we're looking at when studying and paying attention to law enforcement suicides are substance abuse, marital problems, PTSD and anxiety and depression, health concerns, and financial concerns. We'll get into the PTSD and anxiety and depression subject in a minute, but I wanted to share some other numbers with you. According to the National Surveillance of Police Suicide Study, 35 to 39-year-old law enforcement officers are at higher risk of suicide, and those within 10 to 14 years on the job are also high risk. A study published by the American Journal of Industrial Medicine found that 23% of male and 25% of female officers reported more suicidal thoughts than the general population. That is an astounding statistic there, at least to me. Research also shows that the suicide rate among working LEOs is 8 times higher than compared to retired LEOs. We've had a few incidents starting, actually, the most recent that I can think of starting on New Year's Eve. That weekend, we lost two officers in St. Lucie County to suicide. The male deputy committed suicide shortly before midnight on New Year's Eve. His girlfriend, partner, whom he shared a child with, a small child, she committed suicide the Sunday following, so 2 days after. Just recently, we had the murder suicide involving two deputies from a south central region of Florida. And a couple of weeks before that, Puerto Rico Police Department lost, well, actually, not Puerto Rico Police Department, but Puerto Rico PD and one of the municipalities lost two females in one weekend to suicide. And we don't know what people are dealing with. We don't know what demons people face. We don't know the things that people have seen and they see. I do know that I was recently at the Florida Leadership Academy, and there was another statistic that was thrown at me, which was quite shocking to me. Uh, the average person experiences 1 to 2 critical incidents in a lifetime. In a 20-year career, law enforcement officers experience approximately 800 critical incidents. Think about that. Not only think about the fact of how many critical incidents we witness in a career, but what may be a critical incident to you may not necessarily be a critical incident to someone else. The reason I struggled with how personal I wanted to make this is because April 29th, 2005, I was involved in a critical incident. And going through the process of dealing with that critical incident, I never had a thought of suicide or anything like that. But this is not something I normally share, but I think it's important for us to share this. Um, I took a life in the performance of my duties, and it was justified taking of a life. But there was no emotion on my part. I felt like I was emotionally and spiritually broken, and that bothered me. The fact that in my particular case, that I was involved in a shooting, which eventually I was cleared. But I went home that night and slept like nothing ever happened. That messed me up. I'm not gonna lie, not to the extent that I thought about suicide, but again, I don't know what's going through other people's minds. I felt so emotionally and spiritually broken that I had to call my pastor and I had to call my brother-in-law, uh, who was a chaplain for the city of Orlando Police Department, and I told them there's something wrong with me because this happened and I went home and I slept like it never happened. I never lost sleep over it. And it took me a little while to understand. And it took me a little while to work through that. Luckily, I never had any suicidal thoughts, like I said, but that's obviously not going to be the reaction of, from somebody else. I don't know how somebody else is going to react to having to go through that and dealing with the emotions, and dealing with the fact that there was no emotional response on his or her part. And there's so many other things. I mean, the family pressures, the missing birthdays and the things that we see, and then having to go home and kiss and hug your children. Uh, that messes you up. Having to be able to switch off, the ugly things that you see at work on a daily basis, and then go home and be loving, be nurturing, be affectionate with the people that you love. Um, so I wanted to share those numbers. I wanted to put, if you have not been paying attention to the media and you've been, not you have not been seeing the stories about law enforcement suicides, I ask you that you pay attention to it. I ask you that you pay attention to your friends, to your brothers, to your sisters in law enforcement. Be there for them. I also wanted to share a couple of numbers. The police suicide hotline has a crisis text line. You can text the word blue, BLUE, or talk, TALK, to 741 741. Also, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that phone number is 800-273-8255. Again, thank you for giving me a little bit of your time. And if I never had to hear about another law enforcement officer, brother or sister in blue, taking their life, that would make me personally very happy. And I'm pretty sure it would make everybody else very happy. Thank you for paying attention.